Features are used quite a bit in the SurrealDB crate, and I thought I'd just take a look at this because it's used pretty extensively, maybe even more than a lot of crates that you might have seen before. So I just thought I'd first take a look at this, the CFG feature equals, and this is how you do a check to see if a feature is enabled or not, and then you go and, well, the code will exist or not exist, depending on if this feature is enabled or not. And you can see in VS Code and probably other IDs, if a feature is enabled, then you can see it shows up here, it's a little bit brighter. And if it's not, then it's a little bit darker. It's like a little bit, it looks like it doesn't exist, and it makes it obvious enough for you. It does take a little bit to load, so if you're fooling around with this, with feature flags, it won't show up right away depending on your, I think that's just Rust Analyzer, takes a little bit of time to pick it up. But if you wait a little bit, then it'll all show up, and you'll see which features are enabled or not. And so you can see, usually you'll see config these statements on, or these attributes rather, on top of mods, use statements, things like that. But there's quite over functions, of course, you see that quite a bit. But you can also see them in statements here. Like here is here's an if, doing an if check, and then what it does is it'll return a value. But this code will just not show up if this feature is not enabled. So you can see that this is kind of a nice way to add a new function or a new feature. You just you put it behind this flag, this feature flag, and you start writing your code, and people that have not enabled this don't have to think about it. So there's going to be no change to them at all unless they decide to opt into this feature. And then later on, if it gets really stable, let's say you have version 1, and then people that have used version 2, they're really happy with it, then you can make version 2 the default later on. But in the meantime, you can just do whatever you want, and nobody's going to see that code unless they decide they want to. So that's pretty nice. So this using and let statements, and also you see it a lot in these match statements. For example, right here. So here you can see when the database is starting up, what it does is it looks to see what's the backend going to be. So is it in memory? Does it use this? Does it start with file, which means it's going to go and use RocksDB, or is it something else, SpeedDB? So it checks. This is a pretty simple check. It just looks at the file and then checks to see what sort of file it is. And then inside there, you can see it uses this CFG feature and then CFG not feature, and you can see that everywhere. And so let's see, start with memory. So if you're using kvmem, then it'll do this, and you can see this is enabled by default, so it's going to do this check here. And then if you don't use it, then it'll return an error. And so on here, return error if it's not enabled. And you can see this. So this is something you always want to make sure when you're using these this feature check is, so this code is going to exist and this code is not going to exist at this time. But if it's not enabled, then what are you going to do at this point? And you can see it's looking for, it's trying to make this inner this result inner, and also a clock. But if nothing is enabled, what you want to do is you want to return early. So it's kind of like so it's a match statement, but it's also sort of like a regular macro in that it's going to make code exist or not exist. And so the compiler is going to this is like before the compiler actually starts to look at the code. So you want to think, okay, well, if this feature isn't enabled, we don't want to even go past this match statement. And so that's why you want to use return there and just say, okay, this is not enabled, we're just not going to do anything. So it's different from a match statement where you have the code already there and the compiler is looking at it. Here it is a match statement, but inside there this code is going to either exist or not exist. So you always want to keep this this kind of logic as simple as possible, and that's why it's always going to just return error, nice and simple. And you probably don't want to do a lot of complex logic there, because that'll get hard to follow later on when you're thinking about it yourself. And so this pattern is pretty interesting, because a lot of the time you'll see this config on top of a whole module. And so you have a module if this feature is enabled, and a whole bunch of code, and then if it's not enabled, then a whole bunch of code. Whereas here you can just slip it in. And I made a small, just a toy example here, just so that we can see exactly how it works. I just called it nothing. And if you go into nothing, you can see here's the way that you make features, because the cargo.toml here for SurrealDB is so big, it's kind of hard to show in a single video. But if you look at this, here's how you make features. So you have this one is called 1, and it doesn't enable any other features, and this one is called 2, and it doesn't enable any other features by default. And then you can have this default as well, and say, okay, when this is when somebody uses this crate, they're going to have this one by default. And you can see that if you add the name of the feature itself, it's going to complain, because this is a cyclic feature dependency. Feature 1 depends on itself. So just adding this plus this empty square brackets is going to create the feature. And then if you go to main, you can see that it's working. So you can see, for example, we have this function, it's called nothing. This function is called nothing, and they're not colliding with each other because 1 is enabled by default and 2 is not. And if we do this, then we're going to see a lot of complaining. You can see Rust Analyzer is starting to go through that. Oh, Rust Analyzer is getting in the way. That's annoying. Oh, that's because I'm not inside. There we are. Not inside the directory. So you can see nothing is defined multiple times. So now it's picking up both of them. And so you want to keep track of that and make sure that you're not, for example, using using 2 features at the same time. That'll cause duplicate code to appear, like this nothing. And then this is an example of something that you can do, but you probably don't want to do. For this, so this sum struct, you can see we have this config feature equals 2, and it's not enabled, so this name is going to be a string. And if 2 is enabled, then this is going to be an i32, which is kind of weird. What you usually want to use this for is like some sort of new parameter. Let's say new parameter string, and you're going to add it later on. And in the meantime, you don't want it to exist. And then the name won't be colliding, and you won't have like weird behavior with people using this struct that used to be a string and now it's an i32. It's better to you'll see this quite a bit with you want to add a new parameter, but you don't want to break anybody's behavior in the meantime, and so you just you put it behind this flag. And so that is yeah, one of the neat things that you'll see inside there. And this is the way you can start playing around with flags yourself. Just add the features there, bring up a simple main, just like a simple cargo project, and then start playing around with that, and you can see what appears and what doesn't appear. And you can use cargo expand to see the generated code. And I think, let's see if it generates it right away. Yeah, so you can see this is the actual code. So you can see there's going to be 1 nothing, not 2 nothings. And then you can see this sum struct is going to show this parameter, but this one's not enabled. So the second parameter effectively doesn't exist.